Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3715. Today's date is oh, that is really good. All right, today's date is uh, November 21, 2025. It's been almost like morning at 8:55 a.m. By the way, I just recently downloaded this application called Comet browser on my phone. I am not really sure how it would be, but I'm gonna look at that again. All right. Let's just jump back to the question. All right. Yeah. All right. The question is, what if advertisement appeal to ethics? Oh, that is a really good question. Okay. First of all, what exactly is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like force you to think about that reality. And when I try to think about that reality, or when I try to create that reality, I'm kind of like utilizing my information and knowledge and experience that I've been through. This is not just kind of like a normal question and answer. The answer is not stagnant. The answer is kind of like simply the relative. It's a variable. It's not 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. It's kind of like simply what if 2 plus 2 is equal to 3. So basically is this thing, when I try to ask what if question, it kind of like simply has its own answer with kind of like a different reality and things like that. And you have to imagine that reality, and for this reality you have to kind of like use your knowledge and information. And when I try to use that information knowledge, it felt good. It felt, I don't know how do I supposed to explain, knowledgeable, probably. Yeah, it felt really good. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's raw, it's unfiltered, it is just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I'm saying, or do not seek for any kind of like information that I'm saying. It's just my opinion, and opinion are subjective. Alright, now let's proceed. Now regarding about the question says that what if advertisement appeal only to ethics? Now what exactly is this question? What exactly is this thing? The question is actually about that ki what if marketing agencies or any kind of like advertisement that you are seeing are kind of like a being really honest what they are kind of like a saying. Example, there are so many advertisement are actually available. I belong to the India, and in India there are so much advertisement is actually exist. Okay. Recently I was kind of like simply scrolling through YouTube, and there is a kind of like advertisement pop-up regarding about AstroTalk. AstroTalk is a kind of like a some application, is also kind of like a telling about your future and things and that. Now way that they are kind of like a marketing is kind of like a tell us regarding about when you will kind of like a get a job, when will you have so much amount of money, when will kind of like a get married or things or that and that. And way that they are kind of like a advertisement is kind of like a simply very much like a try to give you a kind of like a simply a pleasurable experience that you will kind of like a know when you will get married, or when you will kind of like a have money or things or that and that. And in somewhat something, most of people actually fall for that advertisement. Most of people are actually consider that ki, oh, I wanted to know my future too. So people are kind of like a simply download this application and kind of like a whatnot they do in this application. Okay. Now basically is this thing, if like basically the ads would come kind of like simply ethic or honest regarding about what they do, then probably they would kind of like advertisement in such a way that we would kind of like simply we are kind of like telling your future as much is kind of like possible as we can. But it also kind of like depend on, it also future actually depend on you too, because future is not rely on someone else. Future actually rely on kind of like a effort that you do. And that's a kind of like a simply honest kind of like advertisement. If that's a kind of like a simply honest advertisement, they would kind of like supposed to be show up. Like why, like basically why, like basically why is that kind of like a honest advertisement actually happen, then what would be that particular world? If the advertisement is literally honest, then probably what's exactly wrong with that? Then problem is that na ki it's not kind of like a something the advertisement. Okay, like it's not that kind of like a something advertisement won't able to do that thing. No, advertisement can be honest, and some of the kind of like a assembly product are kind of like advertisement in kind of like a literally honest way too. Take an example as the iPhone 16. iPhone 16 has kind of like a somebody literally kind of like honest regarding about that ki they are kind of like a zero carbon emission. Like they are actually making sure that their product is kind of like a somebody creating zero carbon emission while they are kind of like making their product, which is somewhat something really good too. Okay, yeah. Now how much it's kind of like exactly true, I'm not really sure, but the way that they are kind of like doing the marketing is kind of like a something somewhat something that ki they are kind of like doing it something really much more better way. Now basically is this thing, this honesty is kind of like somebody replicate to the such a audience where you already have kind of like a somebody audience that kind of like a somebody loyal to you. But a kind of like a somebody company who just established right now, they are kind of like a very difficult to kind of like somebody get you. They are kind of like a very difficult to kind of like somebody find you or things like that. And they will kind of like somebody utilize such a techniques that kind of like somebody every people are fall for them. Okay, every people kind of like a trust for them. Now basically is this thing, honesty is a kind of like a thing that everyone started believing that thing. But if you think that is true, that is not. Okay, yeah. Example is this thing, when people ask like people are kind of like a somebody crowded towards kind of like a free thing. Like basically if I'm kind of like a saying I have this chocolate and I'm actually giving you to the free, then every crowd actually came to me. Okay, yeah. And if I'm kind of like a bit really honest that this is the chocolate of 100 rupees and I'm kind of like somebody selling this chocolate for almost like 120 rupees, because 20 rupees is kind of like only for making these charges, making for this chocolate to, I'm kind of like taking 20 rupees for making this chocolate. Okay, yeah. No one will gonna buy that thing from you. Okay, yeah. What exactly is this thing? So should I kind of like a simply that promote my product is a free? No, it's not that. And also you cannot able to kind of like a sustain that thing to for longer period of time. But somehow as advertisement company are kind of like a lie to the customer, is because of that they are kind of like gaining attention. And that is where kind of like a some advertisement are meant for. Advertisement are not meant for kind of like a selling the product. Advertisement are meant for getting the attention, and that is that they want to be kind of like their product are kind of like a relevant to the community, relevant to the society, relevant to the people. Like basically is this thing, if I'm gonna say phone, people might gonna say Apple. If I'm gonna say kind of like a car, people might gonna say Mercedes. If I'm gonna say kind of like a something a TV, people might gonna say a Sony or Samsung or things like that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that a company or wanted to be kind of like something relevant, their brand name are kind of like a relevant to the society. They don't want to be vanish and things like that. Take an example as a Harpic. Harpic is a kind of like a product regarding about cleaning the toilets and kind of like a things and that. But every year they are not like every year, like every kind of like every couple of months they are kind of like dropping a new kind of like advertisement. Why does they do that? They already have kind of like so many people actually using the Harpic for kind of like cleaning their toilets and things and that, but still they are kind of like doing the marketing. Why? Because they wanted to be relevant. They wanted to be relevant with the society. Same thing goes with the parachute oil, same thing goes with the multiple products and things like that. Now regarding about honesty is the kind of like a things that you would be kind of like a bit more honest regarding about your product. Okay, yeah, in somewhat something in it kind of like a much more better way too. But still is this thing that key honesty is not kind of like a somebody dragging that much attention. Okay, yeah. So that's why most of the kind of like advertisement company are not really been really honest with them, with kind of like somebody ourselves. They are kind of like somebody try to things and that. Okay, yeah. This is where kind of like somebody is this thing that ethics and honesty is kind of like somebody really not that good. Now basically, but but if I'm gonna say this thing that key probably is this thing, like let me tell you. Okay, yeah, advertisement agency or advertisement is a kind of like somebody such a branch where the science and philosophy is a kind of like somebody walk on a very different level. Okay, yeah, let me give you perspective. Okay, yeah, a Lamborghini car owner doesn't really kind of like do the marketing or doesn't really make kind of like some advertisement. Okay, yeah, or Bugatti Veyron or Ferrari. Have you seen any kind of like advertisement from Ferrari or Bugatti or Koenigsegg? you probably never really seen them. If you try to find on YouTube, probably you will find it, but probably like their advertisement is kind of like simply very less. Probably they might have kind of like a one or two, nothing really at all. Like basically Ferrari is a kind of like $1 million company, and they will kind of like make a kind of like a millions of kind of like a simply the advertisement if they want. Okay, and they would kind of like share their car, they would kind of like simply sell their car to the rest of the world and things and that and that. But they would not make the advertisement that much. Why is that? Because obviously the people who can afford that car, people will not gonna kind of like simply watch the advertisement in the TV. Yeah, do you understand? Like basically people who can afford this car, people are not the people who kind of like sit in front of the television and kind of like watch the TV to see the advertisement. Okay, yeah. Because this car is kind of like a very fucking expensive, and only people who could afford are those who kind of like simply don't really watch the any television or things like that. And that's why this kind of like a marketing is kind of like a sometimes is kind of like a very crazy. Okay, yeah. Like basically is this thing now, that's why Lamborghini or Bugatti or any kind of like a simply Koenigsegg or things like that, you haven't really seen those advertisement. It's because of that they already knew their customer. Or Rolls Royce, yeah, let's just say Rolls Royce too. Rolls Royce are also on one of them too. They are not kind of like some advertisement, they are kind of like some company, or they are kind of like a brand or things like that. They might have kind of like a some presence in social media platform. Okay, yeah, because we are in kind of like a entering this new world where kind of like social media dictates everything. They have kind of like a presence in social media. They might not do any kind of like some advertisement for kind of like their cars and things and that and that. Okay, because of they already knew the customer who are kind of like a willing to buy this product, they are not meant to be kind of like a sit in front of the television, kind of like a watch the advertisement. Okay, yeah. No, basically this is a kind of like a literally honest version of kind of like a simply the chairman who would kind of like simply give the opinion or give the kind of like a comment or things like that. But advertisement, like basically this is kind of like a simply advertisement for the kind of like a car company, which kind of like a simply have a kind of like a backing of lot of amount of people who are kind of like a backing about money and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. But a kind of like a simply small business partner or small business kind of like a simply very hard to survive in kind of like a simply the society and kind of like a things and that and that. Okay, yeah. So that's why they are kind of like a some literally kind of like a some fake or kind of like a something not honest with the kind of like advertisement and things like that. Now imagine a scenario that what if kind of like a somebody the all the advertisement or kind of like a government do the regulation that they will say that only the advertisement allow when they are kind of like a honesty or when they are kind of like a some ethics regarding about that. Then if such thing will gonna happen, then what would be gonna happen? What if like if every advertisement is bitterly honest, bitterly ethic, everything, so what would be that particular world? Now if such thing will gonna happen, then probably is that people will kind of like assembly buy such a product that kind of like assembly value more instead of look more. Okay, yeah, or kind of like assembly. Okay, um people are kind of like buying some sort of fashion trends or things or that and that. Why? Because they wanted to relevant to the kind of like some fashion trend or things on that. But if the advertisement have this kind of like some regulation to be really honest and things like that, so basically they would kind of like honestly say this thing that we are kind of like some brand, clothing brand, and we are kind of like somebody making this product from this kind of like from this material, and also we are also creating a lot of pollutions and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. No, they are bitterly honest regarding about that. They also mentioned that we are kind of like creating this much amount of pollution while kind of like making these jeans or things and that. No, basically this is kind of like some people are kind of like offended that people might gonna think that dude, they are really honest, but probably is this thing that I will not gonna buy the product from this particular company because they are kind of like creating pollution which is not really good for. Yeah, so probably I would not gonna buy the jeans. Okay, yeah. So probably is this thing that like basically like every clothing brand is kind of like doing the same thing. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing they are kind of like simply like their business will not gonna work out, and as also their company will kind of like a bankrupt. Okay, one thing. Another thing is that as a company who wanted to survive, so they are kind of like somebody creating such a clothing that kind of like somebody resonate with the kind of like assembly how much better they do. Like basically is this thing, they would kind of like assembly say this thing, this is the jeans that you are kind of like buying, these are kind of like jeans are kind of like made by the kind of like assembly the plastic or kind of like assembly the kind of like assembly unusable plastic are actually exist. We are kind of like utilizing that plastic to kind of like making sure it kind of like creates a very good fabric, and the because of this fabric we are kind of like making these jeans. Okay, yeah. So when you buy these jeans you are kind of like simply eliminating some sort of kind of like simply plastic pollution from the earth and things like that. Now basically if the companies kind of like simply establish this advertisement with honesty and with ethically, then people will gonna buy that thing. Okay, even if the product is not really that much good, people will gonna buy this thing because it kind of like simply provide the value instead of look. Okay, yeah, instead of kind of like a fashion and things like that. So basically is this thing, if such thing will gonna happen, if the regulation will gonna happen, and if the every kind of like a brand company kind of like a being really honest and ethics regarding about their products and things like that, then probably is this thing, the all the kind of like some external validation will grow gone. Okay, yeah. Like basically I should supposed to be look good, I have to be kind of like I have this thing, I have to be like basically this external validation will gonna go on. The fashion industry will kind of like completely collapse. Okay, yeah. Because the kind of like assembly they are kind of like making sure there's such a product that kind of like assembly value more than kind of like assembly it look more, it look better. Okay, yeah. So basically it's this thing, they are kind of like assembly the fashion industry will gonna gone, it's not a kind of like a gone, it's kind of like a shifted to kind of like some little bit normal and things like that. Okay, yeah. People are tend to be kind of like a somebody value oriented focus, they will kind of like a buy such a kind of like a value oriented product and things like that. Now if we are kind of like a looking that reality, it's somehow something it felt really good, it's somehow something kind of like a something that he everything is really good, been really honesty and things and that. But dude, as I mentioned, is this thing that every action comes with the consequences. Okay, yeah, and that consequences create a kind of like a somebody a transition in the rest of the world. Okay, yeah. Now what exactly is this thing, what if kind of like somebody everyone literally honesty and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now basically if everyone are kind of like simply literally honest and things like that, then what if there is a particular company who would kind of like somebody literally not honest, and they would kind of like somebody making a jeans which kind of like a highly polluted material, and they would kind of like a sell this product that like a we are kind of like a somebody making this product with a kind of like a somebody very ethical and things and that. Now basically is this thing, because of these jeans are kind of like a somebody very much different than normal jeans, because they are kind of like a cheating and things like that. So basically is this thing, like they are kind of like a growing so much amount of profit till the people don't really knew what exactly is this thing. Okay, yeah, what exactly the product and how much the pollution are creating, because the advertisement are kind of like a bitterly honest and things like that, and everyone kind of like some honesty, so people are actually kind of like fall for them. Okay, this is also kind of like some honest advertisement and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now because of these jeans is kind of like a look really much more premium and things like that, because it kind of like a create a lot of pollution and things and that. Okay, yeah. So people are kind of like buy that particular product and things like that. So people are kind of like doing the cheating. Okay, and when the people are kind of like doing the cheating, it's not really good thing. Okay, yeah, because they are kind of like a founding the loophole, and that loophole will kind of like simply really not that much longer. Probably the government would kind of like do the action with that particular company regarding about everything, but people will kind of find out that particular loophole, and they would kind of like simply making sure that we should supposed to be lie in the advertisement agency too. Okay, another thing is that regulation might should supposed to be very tight regarding about how they should supposed to make the product and things and that. Okay, another kind of like a consequences will gonna happen is that he kind of like somebody is this thing, people are kind of like a big focus on value oriented thing, as I already mentioned. Okay, yeah, but some of the people are not really good at that. Some of the people are kind of like somebody wanted to kind of like do something very differently. Okay, yeah, how this kind of like do something very differently, I don't know. There are a lot of like basically sometimes I just kind of try to talk about something thing, and kind of like I just forget the point that I was kind of like saying that particular stuff. Oh yeah, but what I'm thinking is this thing. What if kind of like some advertisement is kind of like a appeal to the only ethics and kind of like honesty and things and that, it might be kind of like a look really very like a look really very good word. Okay, the consequences should supposed to be happen really good, and everything. I don't know. I'm not actually getting that much amount of kind of like information at the moment, but still, it kind of like felt really good. Okay, yeah. And as also is this thing that I also believe that in the future, the like basically right now this not actually exist. The government is not actually kind of like letting them to kind of like a bitterly honest advertisement and things like that. There is no regulation for that particular thing. But probably is the thing, there are multiples of kind of like a company are kind of like a bitterly honest regarding about their what they do. Like Airtel is a kind of like a simply mobile telecom company which kind of like a bitterly honest regarding about that they are kind of like a preventing the scamster. They also kind of like make sure that their data should supposed to be like basically they are bitterly honest regarding about their work and things like that, which is really good thing. Okay, yeah. Apple is kind of like a bitterly honest regarding about the zero carbon emission, which is also really good thing regarding about. I'm not really sure how much true is that, but still they are kind of like a simply advertisement in that way. That means it kind of like a simply somewhat something really good. Okay, yeah. There are multiples of kind of like assembly clothing brands are kind of like try to make sure that they are bitly kind of like assembly the pollution less or carbon neutral or things or that or that. Okay, yeah. And in the future people are kind of like trying to do this thing because in the end like basically they want attention, and attention comes from the people, and the people has a kind of like some sort of amount of value. If the people value look more, then probably people are kind of like only focus on look more. If the people are kind of like decided to kind of like a value more, then people are kind of like a 10 the marketing agency would kind of like only focus on value more. Okay, yeah. And this is where kind of like society leads to, like we are kind of like entering this modern world. We are kind of like only is this thing that human civilization are kind of like a leads to little bit better way. Okay, yeah. I might think that like basically is this thing I seen kind of like a growth in my surrounding. Like basically there are a couple of kind of like a solar panel actually exist in the rooftop, which kind of like assembly saying this thing that sometimes solar panel is somewhat something really essential for the fuel or electricity consumption or things and that, which somewhat something really much more better way. And probably is this thing na ki in the future without even government regulation, company are trying to do kind of like a bitterly honest regarding about that, because people are actually seeking for value more instead of kind of like simply the look more or kind of like some external validation or things like that, which is somewhat something really much more better way. Yeah, it takes time. It's not gonna happen kind of like something instantly, but still, is this thing that advertisement a company, there are so much amount of companies or brands that actually exist, and they are kind of like somebody doing the kind of like assembly things that kind of like somebody tricky and things like that, because at the early stage of their company they are kind of like a have to lie regarding about their product and things and that. Now I have to be asked this question to myself that you will kind of like simply establish a kind of like a company in the future. Would you lie to kind of like simply your customer, or would you lie to kind of like simply the user that you wanted to kind of like simply use your application or use your product or services, things like that? Well, probably is this thing that I will not gonna lie. Okay, I would not be honest that either too. Okay, yeah. Like basically is this thing na at the early stage of kind of like any business, it's really essential to gain that much more and more attention. And basically is this thing that you have to kind of like do anything to get that more and more attention. But we have to kind of like draw the line that where should we should supposed to be not the cross that particular line and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now, do I any kind of like do any kind of like a fake advertisement? No, definitely not. Okay, yeah. I would kind of like some advertisement in such a way that kind of like somebody leads to people that kind of like somebody drag the attention. Okay, yeah. Like basically is this thing that I wanted to advertise my company. Like basically my company would be Artifact. Okay, my Artifact, and my Artifact is a kind of like a company where kind of like you would kind of like express yourself and thoughts to yourself. Okay, things and that. Okay, yeah, my advertisement is kind of like a simply way that how do you supposed to be feel really good when you do this thing, and it's somewhat something really act exactly like that way. Like basically I also experience this thing when I record Artifact. I also feel really good too, and I wanted to kind of like a advertisement my company in that way too, that you also feel really good when you do that thing, when you express yourself and thoughts and things like that. Okay, yeah. So yeah, okay. It's not kind of like it's literally honest, like which is also honest too. Like basically it's exactly true. Like when I record the Artifact, I feel really good. It's really good. Okay, it's not like that it's completely bad. No. At the beginning it might kind of like a bit really awkward. Like basically it's this thing at the beginning of the recording Artifact. It kind of like a feel really awkward. It kind of like a feel that completely off and talking to myself and things like that. But since I'm kind of like a recording this thing for almost like a decade, I'm kind of like somebody really used to with this thing, and also I'm sometimes I kind of like somebody utilizing my information knowledge and kind of like somebody upgrading myself in little bit much more better way. So yeah, I'm kind of like somebody market my Artifact in that way too. Okay, yeah, because it's somewhat something really true too. Okay, yeah. And yeah, this is yeah, I also kind of like being a kind of like marketing is kind of like a very creative things. Okay, yeah, like basically creative things regarding about your idea, your execution, the way that you kind of like execute things and that. Okay, yeah. So yeah, this is it. I shouldn't supposed to talk more. I'm kind of like really tired to talk right now. My jaws are kind of like assembly just like a big silly. I'm kind of like talking that much faster. So yeah, whatever. This is it, and this is my opinion regarding about this is kind of like okay. Yeah, thank you.